feel like grab behind.
You want to hold this up?
Yes. Here is okay?
Sorry.
Okay. So should we start or?
It's up to you, Professor. He first email wants to introduce you.
Okay.
Not. There we go. Thank you. That sounds better. Well, welcome to our second installment of the law school's new Energy Law Lecture Series. As you might recall, our first speaker in September was Russell Gold with the Wall Street Journal, and we just keep getting bigger and better with our speakers. Our speaker today is international, coming here from Mexico City, and it's just a tremendous opportunity for us to hear about very exciting things happening in our neighbor to the south. So before I introduce him, let me first of all remind you, I'm Bill Keffer. I'm here on the faculty and teach the oil and gas courses as well as a legislative course. And so thanks everyone for being here. Obviously we're going to be talking about oil and gas, and that's the purpose of the Energy Law Lecture Series. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to also recognize another special guest who's part of his delegation today, because we have a series of special events that are happening on the university in light of their visit. So if you would help me also welcome and recognize the Consul General from Mexico's consulate in Dallas, Texas, Mr. Jose Octavio Tripp. All right, well, we're starting a little bit late. Here's what we're going to try to do. Our speaker's going to make his remarks, get us to probably about 12:35 or so, and then allow the remaining time for questions that you might want to ask. So be thinking about your questions. And I'm going to now introduce our guest speaker, who is Mr. Carlos Ortiz. He is currently the Director of Information and Energy Projects with the Ministry of Energy with the Mexican government. And as you might know from all of the news coverage over the last year, there's a tremendous sea change taking place in Mexico with respect to the oil and gas industry. And not since 1938 have we seen these sorts of opportunities. And obviously with the oil and gas renaissance that's taking place in the United States as well as around the world, this is just a great opportunity for both countries, and a particularly great opportunity for the state of Texas, for Texas Tech University, and hopefully for this law school. So please help me welcome Mr. Carlos Ortiz.
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here in Texas Tech University. I would like to begin by asking if anyone here is somewhat familiarized to what is going on in the energy sector in Mexico. So just so I have a clear idea on where should I start or how in depth should I go into this. So, hands? Okay. So, thank you. As you all know, Mexico is going through this energy reform. So we're going to do a small presentation today that covers two key items. The first one is a brief introduction into Mexico's energy reform. Why do we need an energy reform? What is the logic behind everything that we've been doing? What is the energy reform? What kind of new opportunities it opens? And what are the main benefits that we expect for the country? And the second one, and this is mainly geared because my office is in charge of human resource development and research and development in the energy sector, is the Strategic Human Resource Development Program, and what kind of opportunities this type of program and the resources that we have open for cooperation between Mexican institutions and U.S. institutions and for students as well. So I'd like to start with a brief intro on why do we need an energy reform. And I'm going to speak a little bit on what the key indicators we saw that led us to conclude that a reform of this nature was very much needed. First and foremost, as in the rest of the world, oil production keeps getting more difficult and more difficult. And Mexico was not an exception. Oil production had been declining steadily ever since Cantarell, which is one of our main oil fields, started declining. The whole production in Mexico went from a peak in 2004 of 3.4 million barrels a day to 2.3 million barrels a day today. And this trend keeps on going downwards, so it was imperative to do something. This is tied to an increase in investment. So as you well know, not only are we producing less oil by the day, but we need a much larger investment to get to the oil that we are producing. So at the moment, the investment for oil production exceeds $20 billion a year, and the trend in production keeps going down. So this is a clear indicator that there's something going on in the energy sector and something needs to be done. And in terms of public finances, this has not been felt so massively because from the year 2004, where we were producing almost 3.4 million barrels a day, to now, the oil price has increased to a peak of $101 in 2011, and this for the Mexican mix. But it's still a challenge that we must tackle. In terms of natural gas demand has increased steadily in Mexico. Production is very low, and with this scenario, during 2013, natural gas imports have exceeded 29% of national consumption. So we have natural gas coming in from Peru, we have natural gas coming in from Bolivia. I'm sorry. And this is something that has made us dependent on foreign natural gas and has created this scenario where we more and more need to use fuel oil and other alternative oil sources to produce the electricity that we need in Mexico that are dirtier. And Mexico is has the fourth largest reserves of unconventional gas in the world, which are completely unexploited. So this is another key element that we need to tackle. And as you know, a new area in oil exploration and production is here. The easy oil is gone. We are way past the days where Cantarell would produce a million barrels of very easy oil a day. And most of the Mexican prospective resources today are found in places where we traditionally don't go. This is oil, water, unconventional gas and oil, tertiary oil, and recovery in mature fields. In terms of fuels and refining and petrochemicals, We're importing most of the fuel that we're using today. This has produced losses in the last 9 years for $12,000 billion. In terms of petrochemical, we're also very inefficient. 65% of national use in petrochemicals is imported, and this has produced losses of $3 billion in the last 9 years. The ratio of imports to exports in the oil sector has drastically changed in the recent years. In 1996, as you can see, for every dollar of oil derivatives that we imported, we exported $6.86. By 2012, for every dollar that we import, we're exporting $1.62. And this line that you see, net importer, net exporter, we're steadily and slowly approaching it. And without substantial changes, we would shift the Mexican environment from a net importer of energy and oil products to from a net exporter, to a net importer. And this is inconceivable for a country whose 40% of public finances historically have come from the energy sector. So the previous model was completely exhausted. In terms of oil, we had one state-owned oil company, which is Pemex, and our regulatory environment dictated that Pemex had to do every single activity in the oil sector. Pemex had to do it alone. There was no mechanisms for Pemex to share risks with private enterprises. And where Pemex wouldn't go, no one else could. If Pemex didn't have the technology or the knowledge to exploit deep waters, no one else could. Same thing with unconventional oil and gas. So this model was clearly not working for us. In terms of electricity, and this is not the main focus of our talk, but it's also relevant on why we got into the discussion of an energy reform, our average electricity tariff is 25% higher than the average tariff in the U.S. Without subsidies, this average differential adds to 73%. We have 149% more expensive electricity tariff in the residential sectors, specifically in the high consumption sector, 135% in the commercial sector, 69% in public services, 84% in industrial. So this creates a scenario that is very complicated for industry and commerce to thrive with these electricity prices, especially with a neighbor that has this differential, and that is our main competing partner. So all of these elements, amongst many others, led to the conclusion that an energy reform was way overdue in Mexico and that we needed to tackle the issue from the roots. So what was proposed as an energy reform, and what is being done to change the scenario? First, this is the most transcendent energy reform in the last 8 decades. As was just said, last structural energy reform happened 76 years ago, when oil was expropriated, and it was dictated that only Pemex could participate in the oil exploration and exploitation activities. So for the oil and gas sector, we wanted to create a scenario to attract more capital, attract more technology. We wanted to reach the non-conventional and difficult oil and gas fields that we're not reaching today, and mainly put an end to the oil and gas production decline that we are seeing today. In terms of electricity, we needed to create a retail electricity market that would allow public and private enterprises to play the same game with the same rules, foster private investment in the electricity generation, production, transmission, and this increased competition can promote more affordable electricity. And this is a model that's been proven many times. So the 6 key principles of the energy reform are the following. All of the oil and gas in the underground is still and remains national property. And this is something that is very rooted in Mexican culture. Different to other countries in the world, the resources under the ground are not, do not belong to the people that own the ground, but to the nation. And one of the key discussion elements was, would an energy reform privatize the resources under the ground? And there is a massive opposition in the country to that scenario. So we needed to design and implement an energy reform that would foster competition, that would allow investment and private participation, but having oil and gas in the underground remaining as national property. Second, there's fostering of free association and competition between state-owned enterprises and private enterprises in all activities. Deep structural transformation of CFE and PEMEX and fortification of regulating bodies, and we'll see a little bit about this. The fourth element, transparency. There's a big public perception that activity in the energy sector is widespread, corrupted, and we needed to create the instruments for this to change, for all the operations to happen in a transparent and clear scenario. The fifth one is making sure that, that there are enough mechanisms that guarantee environmental protection and that clean energy is promoted as a way of transitioning from an era of oil and gas to an era of renewable energies. And the sixth one, which is mainly what I have in charge, is we needed to increase the ownership of this energy reform for Mexicans and for Mexican companies. And this happens exclusively by fostering human resource development, fostering research and technology development and promotion. So in terms of the regulators, our previous regulators were not ready for a challenge of this nature. So a lot of the discussion on the energy reform happened around how do we strengthen our regulators for the energy reform to happen, to be competitive, and for the industry not to expand its reach beyond regulation, beyond a healthy and manageable regulation. So the regulators for CRE, for the electric sector and gas, and CNH for hydrocarbon are transformed in order to have more tools and more autonomy and budgetary autonomy. So both regulators will be able to produce income from the fees and taxes that comes from the services they provide. And they will be in charge to ensure that tenders and contracts and permits are carried out with full transparency and strict accountability mechanisms. And they have all the mechanisms to cooperate with all the agency, environmental, energy secretary, competency, and so on, to foster healthy competition. So with this new mandate and reach, the regulating bodies are able should be able to do their job in a more effective way. In terms of the state-owned productive enterprises, they move from the centralized bodies with no autonomy, no budgetary autonomy, to this new mechanism called state-owned productive enterprises. They cease to be decentralized and become productive state enterprises owned 100% of the state. They are strengthened with new tools. They are allowed to cooperate with private enterprises to do investment, to do research, to do exploration and exploitation activities. They have a budgetary and administrative autonomy. Now their income, the board can decide how to reinvest this income, how to use the income more effectively. The board of directors is rearranged in accordance to best international practices. And with the new tax regime, just to give an example, Pemex will be paying 90 billion pesos less, sorry for the mistranslation, in taxes than what it did previously on an annual basis. So that would be around $900 million less, if I'm translating correctly. And how is this is going to happen through exploration and production contracts. The key aspects is that, as said before, state-owned enterprises can engage in exploration and production contracts either with private entities on their own or in association of the two. And this is all going to be managed in international arbitrage and protection by Mexican laws. So the way it's working, we had round zero throughout 2014, and the way round zero worked, it was like a first tender catered exclusively towards Pemex. This is a mechanism that was designed in order to strengthen Pemex instead of cannibalize Pemex. Any energy reform in the world that pretends to be successful needs to strengthen the state-owned company first. So the objective here was for Pemex to identify the projects and the place that they can reasonably exploit in the following years. So Pemex participated in this round zero, and the company was assigned 83% of 2P reserves. And then in 2015, we'll have what we call round one. And round one is open for 3.7 million barrels in 2P reserves and 14.6 million barrels in 3P reserves. And this is open for participation of any private company, either on their own or in conjunction with Pemex. So this round one is the first mechanism through which private investment can actually begin to flow into the Mexican oil and gas exploration sector starting next year. And what are the expected? So this is a summary of the general terms of the energy reform. In reality, the structural changes are many. They begin with the Constitution, which grants a legal certainty that the changes being made are going to give certainty to investment and are here for the long term. As you can imagine, just as in the US, changing the Constitution is a very long and complicated process, so this is not something that can be reversed on the short term. But it is just a very basic summary of what is going on. And considering that we are in the law school and I'm not a lawyer, so you might probably have a lot of questions regarding how the legal elements are going to work, and we can definitely get you in touch with the right people to see some of these more specific elements. And the benefits that are expected through this energy reform are, first, a growth of GDP, an additional 1 percentage point in 2018, and an additional 2% in 2025. We're expecting at least, and this is a very conservative calculation that we made, at least 500 additional new jobs in 2018 and 2.5 million in 2025. And we're going to get into a little detail in the further slides regarding job creation and human resource requirements. There is expected an increased oil production by 500,000 barrels per day in 2018. An increased natural gas production from 5.7 million cubic feet per day in 2013 to 8 million cubic feet per day in 2018 and 10.4 million in 2025. And these should translate into reduced electric and energy gas prices. So let me get now to my main core area of expertise, which is the Strategic Human Resource Development Program. So with the energy reform, first we had the constitutional reform. After that, all of the secondary laws were reformed, and the secondary laws reform was institutionalized, if that's the correct word, on August 11, 2014. And on that day, the president, Enrique Peña Nieto, instructed 11 key actions that were needed in order to implement a successful energy reform. And the sixth action was for the Energy Secretary, the Secretary of Public Education, CONACYT, to develop this Strategic Human Resource Development Program for the hydrocarbon sector. So that whole task was put in my office to coordinate and to assemble this program. And one of the elements that we changed is that when the President announced this, he mentioned that public education and CONACYT would be in the team, but we added other agencies that we thought that needed to be in the equation. So we added Pemex, we added CFE, we added Foreign Relations and Work Secretary. And the second one is that when he instructed this, he spoke about a program for the hydrocarbon sector focused mainly on scholarships. So we took the idea and we expanded it to the entire energy sector, and we did a more holistic approach to a program, not just scholarships. Scholarships are a key element, but we went way beyond that. So the key messages for this, the program are: first, with the new energy reform, we should be expecting 500,000 new jobs by the end of 2018, which is the end of this present administration. And out of those 500,000, 135,000 of those jobs are direct jobs that require specific technical expertise and specific technical knowledge of the energy sector. So the program seeks to identify the gap between supply and demand of talent in the energy sector, and foster the conditions for that gap to narrow all the way to non-existent. And following presidential instruction, we leveraged a lot into a massive program of grants and scholarship for all levels of education, from technical all the way to postdoctoral students. So when we began putting this program together, the first question we made is, what kind of energy sector do we need if talent is not to be a limitant, if talent is not a constricting variable? So we created this vision of what the energy sector looked like for when talent is not a limitant. And we formulated this vision that says that we needed an energy sector that is attractive for investment and professional development, with enough talent in all levels of the labor pyramid. And in order to reach this vision, what do we need to do to generate these conditions in Mexico? So we identified 4 main conditions that would help us foster the vision that we identified. The first one is we needed information and coordination for timely decision making. Up till the moment, there was no prior exercise of identifying or doing a comprehensive diagnostic of what talent and how much talent is required in the energy sector. So we had these 2 big monopolies, and they had all internal operations in terms of identifying talent, forming talent, recruiting talent, etc. But there was never a federal exercise that would address these elements. So the first element is, how do we generate the information that let us know where are we in terms of talent in Mexico, and what do we need, where do we need to focus our efforts? But not only that, how do we coordinate and organize our efforts that we're doing together with the other agencies that are involved in talent development? So in order to generate the necessary environment for this condition to happen, first, we generated this thing that we call the observatory talent. So it's a group of experts, kind of like a task force, if you will, a group of experts that are continuously mandated with the sole mission of identifying the breach between supply and demand of talent, not only in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality. What kind of talent do we need? Where do we need it? And this task for this observatory talent is providing continuous information into a mechanism that is called the planning committee on the program. The planning committee on the program has representatives on each of the agencies involved, and they're continuously receiving this information from the observatory talent in order to adjust the strategies and the programs that we have in order to reach out and generate the needed talent. The second condition is that We thought that an energy sector that complies with this vision needed trained staff to handle all of the operations of the sector. This means that Pemex, CFE, and any other company that opts to participate in the energy sector in Mexico should be able to find the necessary talent at all levels of the skill pyramid, from very technical blue-collar type of jobs all the way to high management. The third condition is it can get confused with the second condition, but we like to make an emphasis on how they differentiate, which is talent that generates knowledge, products, and services of high added value. And this was one of our main concerns. One thing is to have talent on the operations of the sector, but another thing is to have a thriving sector that produces value beyond the oil barrel, beyond the gas molecule, and beyond the kilowatt hour. And this refers directly to all the tangential companies, entrepreneurs that are directly associated to the energy sector, providing services and products to the energy sector. So one example of our concern in this element is we did an analysis in the wind industry in Mexico. We have a very young wind industry, but it's very fast growing. We went from nothing in 2000 to several thousand megawatt installed today, mainly in Chiapas. So we did this analysis throughout the entire value chain, starting from feasibility, engineering, procurement, construction, commissioning, decommissioning, operation and maintenance. We analyzed how much national content is within this chain, how much of Mexican services and products are happening in this chain. So we found out that it's the answer, at least in the wind energy sector, is less than 20%. So we had 19% were doing some civil work, we're doing some electrical work, but the turbine is not Mexican, the turbine is Spanish or Danish. The operation and maintenance is not happening by Mexican companies with Mexican knowledge. The engineering and so on. So we needed to pay a very close focus and close attention in generating the conditions that would provide us with talent that can get us beyond that. A wind farm, eventually the final product of a wind farm is kilowatt hours, but we need to have a Mexican company that is producing operation and maintenance for the wind turbines. We need, perhaps, not in the short term a Mexican wind turbine, but perhaps in the short term Mexican parts and products that go into the wind turbine. And this goes all the way into the oil and gas sector, same story, different numbers, but very similar. So we needed to generate the conditions for this to happen differently in Mexico and make sure that the energy reform is more and more appropriated by Mexico and Mexicans, and not only in the final product. And last but definitely not least, the fourth condition was we needed an energy sector that attracts talent. It's very ironic to think that Mexico's public finance have received more than 40% of their budget in the last years through the energy sector, and still we have an energy sector where young people are not identified with. They're not pursuing getting involved into the energy sector. So one of the arguments that we use is that the energy sector needs to be as sexy, if you will, as becoming a lawyer, as becoming a doctor for a young person. Get the message out there that working in the energy sector is going to produce a high-paying job, a very successful career, and we needed to change the conditions that existed. We did a survey with young students and young people, what they thought about the energy sector, and their perception is that it's a closed-door energy sector, that you need a relative in the energy sector in order to work there, that it's not a well-paying job. And unfortunately, up until the moment, that perception is based completely on reality. So we need to pay a close focus and attention on how we sell the energy sector and how the conditions exist in the energy sector to attract talent, because without talent, there's nothing we can do. So we built a program, and the program, this is just a general summary of how it's built. We start from the vision on the top, then we go into an introduction, a regulatory framework, a general diagnosis. We identify these 4 strategic conditions, and we develop a series of objectives and actions in each of these strategic conditions. And in this actions line, we develop I do, a toolbox. And this toolbox is a comprehensive exercise that all the involved public entities identify the resources, the programs, and the initiatives they already have in place to promote talent development, to promote research and development. And how do we use this toolbox in conjunction with the Talent Observatory in order to know what the best tool is at the right moment? So for example, if we open a toolbox and we realize that we have a great screwdriver, we would receive information to know that the screwdriver is not the adequate tool at the moment. We should be focusing more on the hammer, for example. And then we develop this matrix of indicators in order to monitor and manage the program successfully. So all in all, my office manages around $500 million a year worth of resources. And all of these resources go to these initiatives, to provide scholarships, to foster research and development. But we needed to organize how we made decisions and how we managed these resources in order to cover, to accomplish our mission of increasing talent, increasing national content in Mexico through very differentiated initiatives. So what we did in this exercise is we identified the entire chain of technology maturity, if you will. Where does technology begin and where does it end? All the way from talent, from building capacities from the bottom up, investing in new laboratories, investing in developing the talent, the new doctors, new postdoctorates, and so on, to consolidating the existing knowledge, the existing scientific communities, and all the way to exploiting the human asset and the knowledge asset that we have in Mexico. So for each of these steps, we developed differentiated programs that would foster the environment to generate the conditions that we needed. So for example, on the first circle, talent and capabilities formation, so we are investing heavily in scholarships, but we also need to invest heavily in selling these scholarships, getting the young people to know that we have all these resources for them to come to Texas Tech, to do a master's, for example, to do a doctorate, for example. But we also initiated this regionalization program that we call, where we're working with each one of the states in the country to identify, first do a needs assessment and identify how each of the regions in the country, given their natural resources, given their human resources, their infrastructure, how can they play a key role in developing knowledge and talent for the energy sector. And once we identify, we are investing in developing the laboratories, the programs, everything that this region needs in order to reach their true potential. Then we go into linking our existing communities. So we developed this thing called the Mexican Centers for Energy Innovation. Throughout 2013, we launched the first 3 SEMIES, which is the acronym, one for geothermal, one for solar, one for wind. And the mission of these centers is to, what we're putting in the table, we're putting resources for them. We invested in 2013 more than somewhere around $160 million in the first 3 SEMIES. So we're asking this existing community, how can we, identify the main barriers that are ahead of increased technology penetration in the energy sector. So, for example, what are the barriers that are stalling solar energy from increasing their penetration into the Mexican grid and so on? And how can we, through research and development and international cooperation, tackle each one of those barriers one by one? So this is the mission of the SEMIES, and we're working with very similar initiatives in the oil and gas sector for deep waters and for several items. This year, we're launching the SEMIE for biofuels and for ocean energies. And we're also working with different programs, like something we call the Innovation Lab, where we're financing young researchers that are more in the entrepreneurial side. How do they get their research out in the market? How do they build a business plan? How do they identify what their market is and how they link their knowledge into the market? We have a very aggressive postdoctoral formation program. So we have young doctors going to universities all around the world, the US, to do their postdocs. And something we did for them is in this program, we implemented something we call the startup lab, the startup package. So if you go, let's say a young doctor comes to Texas Tech and they do a successful postdoctoral program for 2 years. Okay, I'll wrap it. If you're successful and you're done with your postdoctoral program, we give you a startup money to come back and to choose the university where you want to initiate your lab instead of staying abroad. And so we have a lot of initiatives like this, and a lot of them require cooperation with new universities, new programs. So we're more than happy to share what we're doing. So just a small last thing, we have several publications. This one all the way down there is a bi-monthly magazine that we have that is called Proyecto FSE, which means Project Sustainability Fund. And it speaks of a lot of what we're doing. There's a lot of engagement, so I can share the locations for you to know the product. And that will be pretty much everything for me today. Thank you.
Well, an awful lot of information to compress in a short amount of time, so we appreciate you trying to do that, and I know that we're running a little late. If you have to make it to class, I understand, but if you can stay and you have questions, let's go ahead and take a couple of them, and since we're videotaping and simulcasting, I'll repeat the question so that it's picked up over the microphone. So any questions that anybody'd like to squeeze in? If not, feel free to come down front and meet Mr. Ortiz in person, and you can ask him a question directly. Really appreciate everybody being here today. Please help me again thank Carlos Ortiz. I knew that was going to happen because it gets right up to class time. Well, they start bolting. So.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe they'll come down. Yeah, I know. It's just hard to get it all done in the little amount of time we got. Listen, I've also, since you're staying overnight,
Yeah.
I know Jennifer probably asked you, but I've gone ahead and made reservations for dinner at the restaurant at the hotel, and I'm going to bring over a few faculty members and maybe a couple of students, if that would be okay, at 6:30.
Yeah.
Think that'd be all right?
That'd be
okay,
great. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Well, and then I know that Dario's we're going to go to some room here in the law school for a meeting at 1:15. So between now and then, maybe some people want to come down and say hi to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.